Welcome to a very special edition of ACF Chefs Forum. We are so excited to see you in New Orleans for ACF National Convention, and so wanted to kick off the education and networking in advance of all of us traveling to the Big Easy in a couple of weeks. We appreciate you tuning in today for this webinar and hope you're ready to learn as we shine the light on a very interesting topic, Italian gastronomy. Before we begin, as a note, we want to hear from you. Please use the chat function to collaborate with other chefs and culinary students tuning in, and the Q&A function to pose questions to today's guest speaker. So let's get that conversation going in the chat. If you haven't already, please let us know where you're tuning in from today. I'm Jackie Pressinger, American Culinary Federation's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and I'm honored to introduce an ACF member, Chef Jeremy Lett, the corporate chef, executive chef, for Bloomin Brands, where he leads the culinary innovation, new menu initiatives, and product development for Carrabba's Italian Grill. In addition, Chef Lett also supports innovation and R&D for Outback Steakhouse and Bonefish Grill. And with its headquarters in Florida, Bloomin Brands is one of the world's largest casual dining companies with approximately 87,000 team members and more than 1,450 restaurants worldwide. I could go on and on. He's such a talented professional. We're so glad you're here with us today. At this time, let's welcome Chef Lett. Chef Lett, this session is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Look, it's my pleasure to be here today and speak to everybody. As Jackie mentioned, I'm the corporate executive chef at Bloomin Brands, which is named after the Bloomin' Onion for Outback Steakhouse. We also have Carrabba's Italian Grill, Bonefish Grill. So we have an Italian concept, a seafood concept. We have Fleming's Prime Steakhouse, which is an upscale fine dining prime steakhouse. We have Aussie Grill, which is a relatively new concept. It's a fast casual version, kind of toned down version of Outback. It does burgers and sandwiches. Very, very good restaurant, but it's really located only here in Tampa at the moment. And we have some locations overseas, but we're working on getting that ready to expand. And then we have a very heavy footprint internationally. We have lots of Outbacks all over the country, or all over the world, excuse me. We have some Carrabba's internationally, some Fleming's internationally, and we're working on some of our other concepts. So big company, and it's really fun to work with so many different restaurant brands. My role is, as Jackie mentioned, corporate executive chef. I work for the casual dining branch. So I work for Bonefish, Carrabba's, and Outback Steakhouse. I work on all three brands, but my main role is leading the Carrabba's brand. I'm the executive chef for Carrabba's. I'm on the Carrabba's leadership team. So in that role, I work on brand culinary strategy, long-term planning. I do innovation, kitchen design, work on new technology, new restaurant growth, and also support operations and profitability. But I want to talk a little bit about the role of an R&D chef or an innovation chef. It's kind of a different culinary job. It's a fun job. I really like it. But really what we do here as R&D chefs is primarily innovation. And what innovation really boils down to is recipe creation. We write tons and tons of recipes in this role. For Carrabba's, we have 14 different wine dinner menus. We have 4 seasonal menus, 2 core menu updates. Each of those, I'm developing about 12 to 15 menu items. So that's about 300 dishes a year. Every dish, as you all know, has sub recipes. I've got to make the recipe for the prep, the sauce, the breader. All of those things need recipes. New menu development. This year for Carrabba's, we launched a virtual catering brand called Carrabba's Bistro, and that's only on DoorDash at the moment. We launched a new happy hour menu. We're testing a special events and catering menu in August. And then we also support all the non-core menu things. Like I support the franchise restaurants. I do international support for our Carrabba's in Canada and Mexico. I work on the catering menu. And then we also have a partnership with Delta for sports charter catering, which is like sports teams can charter and get Outback, Carrabba's, Bonefish, or Fleming's. So that's just for Carrabba's, right? I also do a lot of that work for Bonefish and Outback too. So really what it boils down to is I do tons and tons of recipes. That's what an innovation chef really does, at least at Bloomin Brands. Every recipe needs to be documented. You need amounts, yields, pictures, shelf life, plate costs. So a lot of work goes into all of that. And it's pretty cumbersome. There is a lot of recipe development in this role, but it's really fun. And for me, that's the most fun part of being a chef. I love doing innovation. I love creating recipes. So for me, it's a really enjoyable job. It's very fulfilling. And I get to work in a real nice test kitchen. We've got all this great, cool equipment. I work with some of the best chefs in the industry. And so it's really nice to be able to collaborate with the other chefs and kind of get their opinions on my food and share ideas and things like that. So it's a really great job. Very, very happy to be here. I will say there's here's an innovation chef misconception. I think some people think that innovation chefs, we just kind of cook and play with food all day long. And I tell you, I would love for that to be true. But unfortunately, it's not. We're in a corporate R&D role. You do spend a lot of time in the corporate environment. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of project updates. I spend a lot of time working with vendors. I do culinary demos. I do training. I do presentations. I also travel, visit the restaurants quite a bit. I go see vendors and work with new products. I do new store openings. And then I also have my desk job. So tons of emails and things like that. So, you know, I wish I came in here and just made up recipes all day long, but, you know, unfortunately, that's not the reality. There's a lot of other things you have to do. And it's a lot of work. So time management and prioritization and efficiency are really key in this type of role because, you know, it's not like running a restaurant. I ran a restaurant before, and it's a much different thing. You come in, you have your four walls, you have your people, you've got to get through the shift. This is a different environment and really a different kind of beast. So it's challenging. It's different than running a restaurant. But it's a great job. I will say I thought R&D was going to be easy when I got into it. I thought I'd be leaving at 2 to 3 o'clock every day, go play golf, and that's just not the case. So I do want to clear up that misconception. And then part of research and development, there is also sort of the unglamorous part of research and development. I touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of data recording, a lot of repetitive things you have to do, getting yields. Yeah, I need food products and ingredients I have to source, look at subs, new products when we're commercializing a sauce, or looking at quality assurance or food safety things. There's a lot of opening boxes and weighing things and writing down how much it weighs, getting yields, getting gram weights of cooked product and all these things. And it's very tedious and very time consuming. So that's kind of the not so fun part of R&D, but you know, it is pretty interesting. I really like working with data and working with numbers. So for me, it's a lot of fun as well. And then in addition, I do a lot of work with technology and design. I work with new equipment. I work with kitchen design. I work on schematics and how to lay out kitchens for our new restaurants and our existing restaurants so they can operate more efficiently, more smoothly, and more consistently. So I'll have a little more time to talk about corporate R&D if you're interested at the end. But I did just want to give a little intro to kind of who I am and what I do. And now I want to talk to you about Italian food, which is one of my favorite subjects. And for me, I have a personal connection with Italian food. My grandmother is from Sicily. Her name is Nina, and she was, you know, the classic stereotype of what you think of an Italian Sicilian grandmother is. She'd be in the kitchen all day long cooking, making sauces and meatballs. She didn't measure anything. She didn't write any recipes down. She would just kind of make things and, you know, really cooked with love. And her meals brought my family together. And I have a lot of really fond memories as a kid, being around Nina's table and being with my family and sharing those moments with them. So that's probably for me where the spark and the love of food started. But I think a lot of people probably have that same connection with either an Italian grandmother or somebody in their family, whether they're Italian or not. But the thing I love about Italy is it's very regional. So Italy doesn't have a real strong unified culinary tradition like some other areas might. Italy is never really ruled by one major ruler over the entire country of Italy. So everything is very regional and all the traditions vary by each area. Each town, each province has a pasta and a sauce combination that's part of their local culture. And Italians identify as regional more than they identify nationally. And what I mean by that, is a Sicilian would say, I'm a Sicilian first, and then I'm Italian, or I'm Roman first, and then I'm Italian. That's kind of how it is over there. So a lot of pride in their regions and a lot of diversity. And diversity in food really makes dynamic cuisine. And so I really love that about Italy. Italy has 2 designations which certify that food products adhere to guidelines of how and where the products can be made. And they don't do this in every country. We don't really do it in the United States. They have IGP, which means protected geographical indication. And that designates that the product is linked to a specific geographical area. At least one phase of production or one primary ingredient originates in that area. IGP is a good indicator of authenticity, but it does allow for products to be processed outside of the region and brought in. So it's not the highest level designation you can get. That would be DOP, which means protected designation of origin. And DOP ensures the highest quality according to the Italian tradition. The label guarantees that the product has been grown, produced, and packaged locally. And DOP products are really the most authentic tastes of Italy. And the reason I mention that is because it's going to come up in the region that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. So I do want to share a couple of slides with you. All right, so Italian cuisine. So some components of Italian cuisine Italian cuisine has quality ingredients. That's a big piece of Italian cuisine. And like I mentioned before, the diverse microclimates produce some of the best ingredients in the world. And that's going to make a big difference in the cuisine. Another thing about Italian cuisine that makes it what it is good technique. And this is born out of long regional traditions in the area. So people really focus on technique. Attention to detail. Italian cuisine is a simple cuisine, but it's made with care. There's a lot of pride in their cooking in Italy. So the cuisine is made really hands-on with a lot of attention to detail. Flavorful. Now, this is big in all cuisine for sure. Many layers of flavor and very aromatic. And you'll find that in Italian cooking for sure, and really in any good cooking. And then the last is experience. Regional foods are really celebrated in Italy, and sharing a meal is part of the culture. So it's a really experiential thing when you have food in Italy and when you dine together. And to me, that's a big part of what makes food great. So here's the region I wanted to talk a little bit about, and that's Emilia Romagna. And that's the region you can see on the left. That's kind of in the north central part of Italy. And it's broken up into these regions here. You got Parma, Reggio Emilia, Modena, Bologna. A lot of you probably heard of these areas. Ferrara, that's where the Ferrari Italian sports cars are made. And Emilia Romagna is interesting because it has 44 food products designated as IGP or DOP. And that's the most in any region of the world. And it's a really small area, but it creates a ton of diverse and wonderful food products. And it really is a food lover's place. So if you ever get the chance to go to Emilia Romagna, I would highly recommend it. The food there is wonderful. I'm going to talk about a couple of the products they have that are produced in Emilia Romagna. And it's often called the food capital of the world. And one of those is balsamic vinegar of Modena. And you can see that DOP designation there. And I've got a picture of the bottle here. That's made by the must of local grapes. That's the only ingredient. And the vinegar is fermented in wooden barrels for a minimum of 12 years. So this isn't the same balsamic vinegar that you might get in a grocery store that's really sweet and very loose. This is a dark, complex, syrupy vinegar. It's very, very expensive. The sugars and amino acids in the vinegar react with each other, produce new flavors and aroma compounds that enhance the flavor over time. Those chemical reactions create flavor, and it makes a real complex and wonderful tasting product. So if you get the chance to try true balsamic vinegar of Modena, I highly recommend it. It's wonderful. You only need a couple of drops. It goes great on cheese, on gelato, on cured meats. It's really great. Another one is prosciutto di Parma. This is produced in Parma, and it's a cured ham known for its delicate and sweet flavor. And that's made in the hills around Parma, and you've got mountain air around it where the air is dry and sweet, full of aroma, and that air helps create the flavor in the ham. The pigs are a specific heritage breed that are fed leftover whey from making Parmesan cheese. So if you're going to be a pig that's going to get eaten, this is probably a good pig to be because they at least have a great diet. This gives the ham a little bit of a nutty flavor that they get from eating the whey and the cheese. The ham is salted and cured for up to 3 years and then hung to dry in large windows. And that mountain air I mentioned before kind of helps add to the flavor as that ham finishes. And then Parmigiano Reggiano, I'm sure everybody's heard of that. This is called the king of cheeses, and I definitely agree with that. I love Parmigiano Reggiano. I think there's no substitute for it. There are other great cheeses, but really, for me, this one is the best. It's made from the evening milk only of cows in the provinces of Parma and Reggio. The wheels ripen on wooden shelves in a temperature and humidity controlled environment for 12 months to 2 years. And then the cheese is tested by a grater that taps on the wheel, and they're trained to know how the product is by the sound. They can tell if there's weird cracks or voids in there by listening to the sound and hearing the vibrations. The wheels that pass that test are then branded on the rind, and you're all probably familiar with that brand on the rind, and that shows that it's authentic. And this is made in just a little region of Emilia Romagna. And then there's a fresh pasta tradition in Emilia Romagna. What's really wonderful, they have a tradition of pasta made from soft bread flour and eggs. And there's historically women made the pasta. They would hand roll and shape it and sell it in markets, and they were called spolinas. A spolia is a big round sheet of pasta that's been stretched out, and the people that do it would be a spolina. When I make it, I'd be called a spolino. And in Emilia Romagna, a very popular pasta is tortellini, and that's a stuffed pasta, and that's what these ladies are making right here. And it's a filling made with a lot of the really high quality regional products I mentioned before: prosciutto di Parma, pork loin, mortadella, Parmigiano Reggiano. All that's made right there in the region, and that makes up the filling. And then it's wrapped with this hand rolled fresh pasta shaped by hand, and they're really, really wonderful. They serve it in brodo, which is broth, and so the It's a very clean, savory broth, and you really get to experience the flavor of the filling of the pasta. And it's absolutely excellent. If you get the chance to go to Bologna or Emilia Romagna, you've got to have tortellini. So that's the end of my, oh, get out of here. Okay. So next I wanted to go over, I'm going to show you how to make a dish, right? I'm going to show you how to make tagliatelle al ragu. And it might be a little clunky because I have to kind of move the camera with my hand. So I apologize for that. But tagliatelle al ragu is a traditional dish of Bologna, which is the capital of Emilia Romagna. And it's a great city. The University of Bologna is there. And that's the oldest university in the world. It's a really great food town. And tagliatelle al ragu is also sometimes called tagliatelle bolognese. And that just, ragu is a chunky, slow cooked sauce, and bolognese is pretty much the same thing. So it's made with the fresh egg dough in the handmade pasta tradition. So I'm going to show you how to make the sauce and how to make the pasta. Now, ragu would typically be cooked, it would be slow cooked on a Sunday, and people would use the leftover pork and beef and whatever they had left over meat wise and kind of make that sauce and just let it cook all day on a Sunday. The house fills up with aroma, and it just makes a wonderful experience. And it pairs really well with fresh pasta made with eggs, which is what they do in Bologna. So first, we're going to do our raw meat. So you're going to take your pork, beef, and pancetta. Now, pancetta is a cured Italian bacon, and you're going to cook that off. Now, I've already done that just so for the sake of time here. I've already done that. And now we're going to go to our mirepoix. Now, I'm going to set my camera down a little bit, so it's going to cut my head off by y'all. But hopefully you can see this. So here's my mirepoix. I've got my onions, carrots, and celery, and that's cut into a brunoise. And the aromatic vegetables is a place where you can create flavor in your dish. Aromatic vegetables are found in almost all cuisines, really all cuisines. In mirepoix, it's called mirepoix in French. In Italy, it's called sofrito. It's called Holy Trinity in New Orleans. But it's really the same thing. It's some vegetables that help create complexity and depth to your dish. Now, in Italy, they use onions, celery, carrots, and then garlic. But for instance, in New Orleans, they swap out the carrots with bell pepper because bell pepper grows more easily in New Orleans. So that's, really you just want to have some type of really nice blend of aromatic vegetables that's going to give this a nice balance. The onions are going to create a sweet and meaty, savory flavor as you cook those. The celery is going to add some green, fresh notes with a little bit of bitterness. The carrots will add some sweetness, and that's going to make our dish, it's going to change the flavor in our dish. This is a moment to create flavor, and those moments are important. So know how to use them, know what they are, know how to use them. So I'm going to go ahead and melt my butter, and I'm going to add my mirepoix. So as I add my mirepoix, I'm going to let that cook. I'm going to start on my pasta dough. Let me go ahead and get my flour. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our flour. Now my recipes are pretty simple because I don't remember things very well. So what I do for my pasta for this type of dish for tagliatelle, I do 100 grams of 00 flour, 1 egg, and 1 teaspoon of water. Now I'm doing double that today because I want to do a little bit more. So that's usually for about one person. So this would feed about 2 people. So I've got 200 grams of flour. Now this is a soft wheat flour, 00. This is made from bread wheat. Most of the global production of wheat in the world is bread wheat. And that's a low protein soft wheat. And you're going to see that pretty much everywhere else. Now there is also durum wheat. And you find that in the southern part of Italy. That has a higher protein content. And that's what produces semolina flour. Like I said, this is bread flour. And typically you'll see in northern Italy, you'll see bread flour with eggs. You add the eggs to create more protein because it's a low protein flour. And then in southern Italy, where the semolina and durum flour grows more easily, and they also were typically a little more impoverished in the south, so they couldn't afford eggs. So you'll see in places like Sicily and down in Naples, they do semolina flour and water. There's no eggs, and that's how they make their pasta. But like I said, we're doing Bologna style pasta today. So I've got my soft 00 bread flour. I'm going to go 2 eggs right in the center. And then 2 teaspoons of water. I'm going to take a fork. Just like I'm making an omelet, I'm going to start scrambling my egg. I'm sure many of you have done this before. This is a really enjoyable way to make pasta. I love doing it by hand. I think you get a real nice feel for how to do things when you learn how to make them by hand. And now if I'm making pasta for 50 people, I'm probably not going to do this by hand. I'll probably use a machine. But I think it's important to know how to do it by hand so that you really get a good feel for it. Now I'm going to keep on stirring, and I'm going to kind of pull my flour from the bottom as I go. And what I'm looking for is a real nice silky dough. And you can see it start to thicken up. Hopefully you can see it start to thicken up. And as it does, I'm just going to keep pulling flour into the center. Continue doing that same back and forth whipping motion like I was whipping eggs for an omelet. As I get closer, start folding my flour in. I'm getting pretty close to go ahead and cut this all in. Go ahead and take my fork out. I take my dough knife, chop all that in. So the protein found in wheat is called gluten, and that's going to help the dough maintain its shape. So what I'm doing here is really getting this mixed together so I can start kneading it. Kneading it is going to stretch the gluten out into long strands and give the dough some elasticity. I'm getting pretty close here. That down. I'm just going to really start working this together, trying to get everything incorporated and get all that flour together, and I'll start kneading it. And go ahead and stir my mirepoix over here. You can smell those aromatic vegetables cooking. And what you're doing when you're kneading your dough, again, I'm really just trying to get everything all together right now. So I'm going to go over and forward, over and forward. And this does take a little while, so I'm not going to do the entire thing. It'll get a little boring, but just so you get the idea here. All my flour starting to get picked up. Now, as you can see, it's starting to come together. My dough is starting to hydrate. And as I'm pushing this, what I'm doing is I'm pushing that gluten so that it all starts to align in the same way. And that gluten network is going to stretch out, and it's going to create a web inside that dough. And that's what I want for my pasta dough. So there's my aromatic vegetables. They're still cooking. I want them to be a little bit softer than that. I want to see a little bit of color. I want some of those sugars in the vegetables to start to caramelize. That's another moment where I can create flavor. I want that in my dish. So my dough's feeling a little bit dry here. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of water, just a small amount, put it on my hands, and continue to work it. And this is what I like about making dough by hand is you can always add a little bit of water. You can always add a little bit of flour so that you can get it just right. And if you end up adding too much water, it gets too wet, you can always add some flour. But once you add water, you really want to keep working it. That water the dough gets hydrated pretty quickly. And you can see it's starting to come together. I think I'm going to go a little bit more water. Oops. Probably a little too much there. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Get a little bit of flour so my dough's not sticking. And then again, I'm not going to sit here and do this the whole time because it does take about 10 minutes, and I don't really want to make y'all watch me knead dough for 10 minutes. I think you get the idea. I'm going to keep doing this until the dough is nice and smooth, fully hydrated. And then I'm going to let this dough rest for about 20 minutes. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm really working that gluten network and getting it all worked up. So I want that dough to relax. Once I'm ready, and I'm going to wrap that in plastic and let it sit at room temperature for about 10 to 15 minutes and let that gluten relax a little bit so I can work with my dough. Okay. Now let's go take a look at our sauce. I feel like I'm ready on my sauce. I can see I've got a little bit of caramelization. My vegetables are starting to get translucent and soft. At this point, I'm going to add my garlic. Now, I didn't want to add my garlic at the beginning because the garlic's chopped really fine. I don't want that to overcook. So I'm going to place my garlic in here and let that cook for about 1 to 2 minutes. And you can really start to smell that garlic. It gets very fragrant. That's adding a real nice element to our dish there. Now, another moment to create flavor. I'm going to add some wine. Now, wine, think about wine when you drink it. Wine is so complex, and it's because of all the different aromas. When you taste wine, you get notes of floral, you get notes of grass, of wood, of earth, of all these different things depending on the wine. So when you add that to your food, you're going to get some of those flavors will go off in your food. Now, it's not going to be as bright as when you're just drinking a glass of wine, but it does go into the food, and it's because of the aromatics in the wine. All of the different aromatic compounds in that wine are going to help create some complexity in your food that's going to give it balance and make it interesting. So without the wine, this is going to taste good, but with the wine, it tastes even better. So again, moments where you can create flavor, that's really important to me. And it's very important in recipe development. When you can add flavor, you want to do it. So now I added my wine. I'm going to deglaze my pan. Again, another important step. I'm getting in there, using that liquid to get all the fun, all the caramelization off the bottom of the pan. And that's going to go into my dish. And you could smell it. And you just know, hey, that's going to be wonderful. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my remaining ingredients, which are crushed tomatoes, chicken stock, my seasoning. This is salt and fresh cracked black pepper. I ground that black pepper today, so it's nice and strong. You can smell it. It's very, very potent, much better than that dry stuff you get in the jar. I would always recommend fresh cracked pepper or fresh ground spices when you can. And then we're going to add our meat. Now, this is the meat that I sauteed off before. This is some pork, some beef, and some pancetta. I'm going to stir that in. And I know it's kind of difficult for y'all to see that, but see, it's really thick. We're going to place this back on the heat, bring that up to a boil, put that on a very low simmer, and let that cook for about 2 hours. So all those flavors are going to meld. That sauce is going to get nice and thick and really complex. And it's just going to smell. It's going to smell at the entire house as I'm cooking that. Okay, next we're going to move on to the pasta, how we're going to roll it. So now again, I'm doing this in the tradition of Bologna, how you would do your hand-rolled pasta. So you want to take your dough, place that on a wooden board. Now what I have here is this wooden board. It's called a tagliere, excuse me. And it's that wood, this wood is going to give it a little bit of texture. And the nice thing about hand-shaped dough and hand-rolled dough, look, I have the little machines where you crank it. I definitely have pasta machines here in R&D, and they make great pasta. But if you make it by hand with a wooden rolling pin on a wooden board and take the time to make it by hand, it's going to have more character. The dough is not going to be super smashed. It's going to have some texture, some bubbles and things like that. And it's going to just be a much better eating experience when you make it by hand. And that's typical of most things. When you take the time, you take the slow technique, really spend the time making it. It usually pays off in the dish that you're making. So in Emilia Romagna and in Bologna, they use what's called a mattarello, and that's a big wooden stick. This is not a mattarello. This is a wooden dowel I bought from the Home Depot store because I didn't want to pay a lot of money for a mattarello. So a wooden dowel works just as well. But I'm going to start pushing my dough Here, I'll turn the camera down so you can see it. Just kind of pushing your dough back and forth, turning it, and you're going to keep on working this until you get a nice big circle, and that's going to be called a sfolia. Remember, the women that make the dough are called spolinas, so this is a sfolia. Now, I'm not going to make you suffer and watch me do this for 10 minutes. So I do have one where I already stretched it out a little bit earlier, and you can kind of see where we're at when it's at a finished state. So here's our sfolia. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to put a little bit of flour in here so it doesn't stick. And then show you how we're doing this. So again, you're going to push forward with my mozzarella. And if you can see my hands, you want to push around the edge of the dough. I'm pushing out like this. I'm not pushing down on the dough. I'm pushing forward and out. And then you will turn it about a quarter of a turn. And again, push out. My hands are like they're on the steering wheel of the sfolia. I'm pushing in and around. I'm kind of always staying around that exterior and pushing forward as opposed to pushing down. And I'm not pushing back this way. I'm pushing forward, and then I'm just pulling it back very lightly. Now, as you get your dough really big, you start to roll it up, and that's how you're going to turn it. Turn it like that, push it over. Now, if you notice, I let it hang off the side. You want the gravity to let that dough pull down a little bit, and it'll help keep your dough circular. It'll also help it to stretch out a little bit. Again, forward, hands around the side, roll the dough up, quarter turn, back over. And that's how you roll pasta in the hand-rolled tradition in Bologna. Okay, now I'm going to show you how you want to cut your pasta. So this is a piece of dough I cut earlier out of my sfolia, and I'm going to lightly flour it just a touch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this up on the ends. I'm going to roll this all the way up to the center on both sides so it reaches in the middle. And then I'm going to cut that with a knife. Now we're doing tagliatelle, which means little ribbons in Italian. So I want these to be little ribbon size. There's a little bit thinner than fettuccine, but thicker than like a tagliarini or an angel hair. So you're looking for a little bit thinner than fettuccine is the best way for me to remember. You want to cut that, and then you take the back of your knife, slide that under your pasta, and let that hang down, and then pull your pasta down like this. And there's your tagliatelle. I'm going to lightly dust that. Put that into a nest. Again, we'll do that one more time. This is really the fun part. I love doing this. Very satisfying. You got to pull those pieces down. Now, if your dough's too sticky, it will kind of stick at the end. So you want to make sure it's lightly floured. And if your dough is too dry, it will start to crack. So you got to make sure you got it the right consistency. A little bit of flour there. And there's our tagliatelle. Beautiful. Now, back to our sauce. So again, I've got some sauce that I've cooked here. This has been cooked down. Took about 2 hours. You can see my meat is very, very thick. A lot of that liquid is cooked out. I'm going to go back on my heat. So first, I'll do it on camera here. I'm going to add some milk and go back on the heat. Now that milk is going to mix into the sauce and give it a real nice creamy texture. Now, as that is cooking, I'm going to toss my tagliatelle into some boiling salted water. The salt is very, very important. That salt is going to help add flavor to the pasta. So the ratio I like to do is 1 fluid ounce per gallon. So 2 tablespoons per gallon is the way I like to do it. And that pasta is going to take in, as the starch starts to leave that pasta, the salt water is going to go into the areas where the starch moved out. And it's going to create a lot of flavor in your pasta. It's going to be, without the salt, the pasta's kind of boring tasting. There's no salt in the dough. There's nothing in that dough but eggs and flour and water. So you need a little bit of salt in the pasta in addition to salt in the sauce. Okay, now I'm going to show you my sauce here. You can see that's nice and creamy now. And at this point is when I'm going to add my basil. Like, I like to add my fresh herbs right at the end. And the reason is because fresh herbs have aromatic compounds in them, a lot like wine, and they're volatile. What that means is volatile compounds are light, and when you break the herb, they float up into the air and they get into your nose. You can smell them instantly. And think about basil. If you chop a bunch of basil in the room, you can smell it all over the place. That's because of the aromatic compounds that are volatile and floating up all over in the air. So you want to add this at the end, so that way you can still smell it and taste it. If you put it in at the beginning, your basil is going to cook up and it's not going to it'll still have some basil flavor, but it's not going to be as strong. So you want to add fresh herbs at the end for that reason. That's also the reason why you always want to try to toast your spices or grind your spices fresh, because that's going to, again, create more aromatic compounds, more volatile compounds in the air. More aroma means more flavor. So one more time back down here. There is our basil's in there. I'm going to move my pasta over here so y'all can see that. Now, remember I talked about that salted water. I talked about how the starch comes out of the pasta into the water. So now I want that starch. It's starchy pasta water is a wonderful ingredient. I can see the different color in it. It's a little bit yellow, and that's because of the starch that's in there. So I want that, right? So I'm going to put my pasta in here, but I'm going to take a little bit of that starchy pasta water and add that to the dish. Now, as I toss this, that starchy pasta water is going to start to cool a little bit, and that starch will thicken. It incorporates the water, and the starch incorporates into the sauce and helps thicken that sauce and gives it flavor and body. Okay, now I'm going to plate our pasta. Take your pasta fork. If you're using a pasta fork, you want to choke up real close to the edge. Lift your pasta up and get a nice tall pile of pasta right there in the center. Now I'm going to go back over with that sauce. You can see all that thick, chunky sauce, the basil in there. That looks wonderful. So there's our tagliatelle al ragu. The last thing you got to do this if you're in Emilia Romagna. If you're in Bologna, you got to hit it with some of that Parmigiano Reggiano. I love that fresh grated Parmigiano Reggiano, grated right to order right at the end. Do a little bit of parsley, some color and some green. And there we go. There's our tagliatelle al ragu. So I want to talk about a couple of things, right? So why is this pasta so good? And hopefully you'll remember what we talked about a little bit earlier is several things. One, quality ingredients. I've got quality meat, ground fresh. The meat was ground by hand, or you would chop it with a knife, very fine. Pasta made to order, fresh made pasta made by hand. So my ingredients here are great. I've got great ingredients, and that shows through in the dish. Good technique, good execution. I had really nice cut sizes on my mirepoix. All the vegetables are the same size. I deglazed the pan and got the flan off, got the caramelization into the sauce. I kneaded my dough properly. I rolled my dough properly. I did everything with a lot of with very good technique to make sure that the food came out great. Attention to detail. Cutting the pasta by hand cutting the pasta with a knife, rolling the pasta by hand. That's attention to detail. Grinding the spices right before I put it in, grating the cheese to order. Again, attention to detail. And those things add depth of flavor. They add nuance. The fresh herbs, the cracked pepper, the freshly grated cheese, all those things, like I said, remember before I said, find times when you can add flavor, moments when you create flavor. Those are moments right there, right? And I can smell this pasta. I can smell that cheese. It smells fantastic. And then last is experience. It looks good. The texture of the pasta is just right. When I bite into the pasta, it's going to be just a little bit firm, but not too firm. It's going to have a little bit of toothsomeness to it. The sauce is nice and hot. And for me, there's nostalgia here. There's emotion. It makes me think of my Italian grandma and her Mother Nina. And so this makes me think about her and puts me in a place where I get happy and emotional and nostalgic. That's all experience. And really, I will tell you, experience is the best way to create flavor or create an experience in a dish. If you can capture emotion in your guests, you're going to have a home run. When you make people feel a certain way, that's a really great way to impact them. You can't always do it, but when you can, definitely capitalize on that. So I'm going to talk about these things a little more in detail, right? Quality ingredients, where it matters most. In the restaurant business, you're not going to make everything by hand. You're not going to sit here and crack open some eggs every time an order comes in. So you want to use quality ingredients where it matters most and still doesn't impede your execution, right? So at Carrabba's, we use a fresh egg pasta dough. It's a great ingredient. I could get a dry fettuccine brought in. I would save a lot of money, but it's not the same. And I want that quality of that egg-based fresh pasta dough. We use grated Parmigiano Romano cheese. It's a domestic blend. It's not Parmigiano Reggiano, but it is a very high quality aged Parma Romano blend. It's all natural. There's no cellulose. There's no fillers in it. It's got a shorter shelf life than that stuff you see in the green cans. And it's harder to manage, but it does make a big difference in the taste. I'm not grinding my meat in house when I'm making bolognese in the restaurants. We got 200 restaurants. We're not going to do that. But we do use a good quality blend of beef, pork, and fat for our bolognese sauce at Carrabba's. We use fresh herbs. We use good olive oils. We use good imported vinegars. We don't use, the domestic vinegar off the shelf. We use imported vinegar that costs a little bit more, but that vinegar really creates aroma and adds flavor to our dishes. Outback, for example, they source a specific size and type of onion for the Bloomin' Onion. It's called a super colossal, and it's a very big onion, single heart, and that's the only onion they use for the Bloomin' Onion. They know where they're grown, what farmers make them, what the soil is like. They know everything about these onions, right? And to be able to do that, you have to have a very large procurement team. So if you're not working for a big company, you're not going to have that big procurement team. But do you have relationships with your seafood and produce vendors? Do you know your vendors well? Are you getting the best ingredients for your money? And I tell you, if you have a good relationship with those vendors and you know where your food is coming from, your products are coming from, you can get higher quality. And then again, like if you're buying, say you're buying from Cisco, right? And a lot of people buy from Cisco, and you're buying a barbecue sauce from Cisco, and you don't have the ability to make it in-house for whatever reason, it's too complex or you just don't have time. Are you using the same barbecue sauce that the restaurant down the road is using? Or are you taking that barbecue sauce, adding some seasonings, maybe a splash of vinegar, with some herbs or something, doing something to differentiate that sauce, to augment it, to make it a little bit different and bring the quality up just a little bit? So that's some ways you can work on improving the quality of your ingredients. Technique. Now, when I think about how I make pasta from scratch, I find the parts of that technique that I can do in a busy restaurant, right? Again, I said earlier, we're not gonna make it like with a rolling pin and cut the dough with a knife, right? We're just not gonna do that. But we do cook pasta in boiling salted water. We do hand saute our pasta with some of that starchy pasta water. We do add grated cheese to order and melt that to order in the pan, because those are places where I can create flavor that we can do in the restaurants that isn't going to impinge our ability to execute. And prep is a great way, right? And prep is really where everything starts. But your sauces are made with good technique. I got a good saute on my mirepoix, and my prep cook knows why. I deglaze the pan, and my prep cook knows why we do that. We add fresh carrots to our tomato sauce and Carrabba's. That adds a little bit of sweetness. We add fresh basil at the end. And all of these things have to be captured in the recipe. The cooks need to know how to do it, and they need to know why, so that they just don't decide to leave it out. And that's part of being an innovation chef, is really finding these things that you can add to your recipes that can be duplicated and will improve the quality of your dishes. Attention to detail. So the details are where good is separated from great. And the details are where a lot of people miss a lot of times. And there's nothing special about the details. They are the basics, right? Cold foods, cold, hot food, hot, consistent cut sizes, proper seasoning. I cannot tell you, I do a lot of R&D trips where we go visit different restaurants and try different places. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen an amazing menu on a description and then the food comes out and it wasn't seasoned properly. It's just the fundamentals. And that's all attention to detail, right? Cook to proper temp. Are you temping your steaks? Are you using a thermometer on your fish? You should be cooking to 145, not 175. Do you have a good sear, a good char on your steaks or a sear on your seafood in a pan? And using, again, I mentioned this earlier, using fresh grated cheeses, fresh cracked spices, fresh herbs when you can. All those little details make up a huge part of what makes a recipe either good or great. Flavor. So flavor is, you really need to, the flavor is some fundamentals with flavor, right? You need to be able to balance sweet, salty, bitter, umami. To some degree, that needs to be balanced because if it's off whack, it's just going to taste weird. So you need to have your flavor balanced. And then you want complexity and depth. And I talked a lot about aroma, and that's because taste plus aroma equals flavor. Remember, we only have 5 tastes. You've got sweet, salty, bitter, sour, umami, but there's thousands of aromas, right? And your nose can smell all these different things. So really, the way to really differentiate your cooking is to add aroma. Add aroma when you can. Vinegars, wine, seasonings, cheeses, those types of things. Texture. Texture is a big part of the eating experience. Is your breader nice and crispy? Are you cooking it to order or is it getting soggy? Is your sauce nice and smooth and velvety, like creamy aioli? And how do those textures balance with each other? You know, if I've got a real nice fresh salad, but it has no crunch in it, do I want to add something to give it that, right? You need to think about those things when you're creating your dishes. Are your acid and fats balanced? That's a big one, right? If something is too fatty, it's going to taste good, but it's going to be it's just going to taste, you're going to taste way down. It's just going to coat your tongue with all that fat. So you need to add a little bit of acid to cut through that fat and open everything up and brighten things. I use a lot of acid in my cooking. And I don't use a lot, but there's usually some vinegar, some lemon juice, some lime juice, and almost everything I make. There's a little touch of that in there because it really just brightens up all of your food. And then finally, does it need something like heat, pungency, astringency? Does it need that? Now, you don't always need that in your cooking, but sometimes you do. Sometimes something needs a little bit of cayenne pepper. It needs some pungency. It needs something astringent. And when it does, you should know that and know when to add those ingredients. When these ingredients are right, you're in the right balance. It's like a symphony in your mouth. And you'll know that, right? You'll salivate for more. And what we say in R&D, the chefs here, we call it comeback flavor. When we're here at Bloomin, if you make something and put it out for people to try and they taste it and they walk away and then 5 seconds later they come back and eat some more, that's comeback flavor, right? And when you see that, you're like, okay, I got that one right. So you know you did something well there. So experience. How can you bring experience to your restaurant? Look, the product that we sell is an experience. You know, we don't sell widgets. We don't sell something you can take home in a box. It's an experience. So it's going to be different every time. It's a difficult business to sell an experience. And I think we all know that, right? But you've got to make sure you hit it right every single time. How does it look? What is the plating like? What is the color? Is the plate balanced? Is there symmetry on the plate? Or maybe there's lack of symmetry and that's designed on purpose. You hear these phrases all the time, like you eat with your eyes. Eye appeal is half the meal. Is it Instagrammable, right? People don't say those things for no reason. That stuff is very, very true. And when you see something, you've already started to make up your mind about how it's going to taste before you even take a bite of it. So that first look, that first appeal of how it looks is very, very important. That sets the tone for the first impression of your dish. Service and hospitality. Now, we're in the back of the house, so we can only impact service and hospitality so much, but that is a huge part of the overall eating experience. So, what I like to do is I like to try to add elements to my dishes that can be done tableside when possible. And I don't try to do things that are too complex. Can we grate some cheese tableside? Can we pour a little olive oil over something tableside? And what that does is it gives the server something to be able to talk about, and it gives them some way to connect with the guests, and it helps create that overall experience of the eating experience. And it really does help a lot. It gives them something to talk about. It makes the guests feel special. So always think about that when you're creating dishes. How can you impact service? And again, you can't go out there and serve the table and ask them how their day's going, when you're in the kitchen, but you can impact service in certain ways. So I always try to think about that. And then nostalgia. Nostalgia is a big one for me. That ties into emotion. But, people like pasta and lasagna because it reminds them of someone. So, like I said, I like pasta because it reminds me of my grandmother. And I think a lot of people are like that. Certain foods will remind people of certain things. And I want to play a video. If I don't screw this up, I want to play you a little clip of something that I just think is a really good illustration of this. And I think most of you have probably already seen this at some point, but it's a good.
Ratatouille? They must be joking.
Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about some examples at Bloomin Brands, where my company here. So let's see if I can get this camera where you can see it. So here are some examples of what I've been talking about that we do at Bloomin Brands, and you probably recognize some of these items. I've got 3 dishes that are from our 3 major brands, the brands that I work on. The first, I want to talk about the Italian concept because that's my concept, and we've been talking about Italian food. So you can see here I've got Carrabba's lasagna, and this is a really a fan favorite at Carrabba's. And again, I'm going to go back over those same points. Quality ingredients. We use fresh pasta dough. We use house-made bolognese. We use house-made pomodoro sauce. So those quality ingredients make a big difference when you make this lasagna. Attention to detail. We layer 5 layers on our lasagna to make sure we have the right ratio of cheese, meat, sauce when you're building this thing up. And you've got 5 big layers of lasagna when you bite into this. Fresh herbs. We use basil in here. Fresh chopped parsley. Fresh cracked black pepper. Freshly grated cheese. And I say these things a lot. It's not rocket science, right? If you use fresh cracked black pepper, it's going to make your food taste better. We've got the Bloomin' Onion here. This is a pretty iconic dish. Hopefully most of you have had a Bloomin' Onion. It's a pretty awesome dish, and a lot of people imitate this, but really nobody gets it the way Outback does it. Outback was the innovator of this dish. And like I mentioned earlier, quality ingredients. And I talked about that onion and how Outback is so specific about how they source their onions to get just the right onion for their bloom. Technique. This is double battered by hand to order, fried to order. And let me tell you, that's difficult. It's hard to make these things. But we've done enough of these where the cooks have a lot of practice, and they sell so many of these that they finally got good at them after a lot of repetition, and they can knock these things out. But I would tell you, the Bloomin' Onion is not easy to make, and that's why it's so delicious. Or everybody would do it, right? Flavor, very well seasoned. Outback food is very bold. We've got a special seasoning just for the bloom flower. Very well seasoned, very, very crispy. We've got our hot, bold aioli dipping sauce that you dip the onions, the onion petals into. That contrast that crispy texture with the creamy aioli. Works really nicely together. And then experience. I've talked a lot about experience, but look at that presentation. It's up on this elevated dish. It's got the on another level. You probably can't read that, but look, it's a big wow presentation. So this is part of that experiential dining I talked about. When you bring this out to the table and set this down in front of a group of people, they're like, wow, this is great. They haven't even bitten into it yet. So they're already excited about the food. Bang Bang Shrimp. This is Bonefish Grill's signature appetizer, and it's a really wonderful recipe. I wish I created this recipe, but I didn't, but it's great. The ingredients, it's got very high quality ingredients. It's got a seasoned flour with 14 different seasonings in there to add a lot of complexity to that batter. So this is imitated a lot, but nobody ever gets it right because that breader is so specific to bonefish. Attention to detail. The shrimp are the perfect size for the breader to create the right crispy batter to shrimp ratio. It's the perfect size shrimp, the right amount of batter, fried to order. We've got hot shrimp, crispy butter, creamy and spicy aioli, kind of similar to this, right? And then the experience. You've got a nice tall presentation here. You've got your chopsticks, real nice presentation on the plate. So when I bring this out, again, it's a wow. People see this and they can't wait to bite into this. I already like this and I haven't tasted it yet, right? So think about that when you're creating recipes in your restaurant. There's a lot more to recipe development than just making sure it tastes good. That's kind of the basics, right? But there's all these other elements. So sorry, I have one more thing I want to say. Sorry, I lost my notes. I got out of order over here. Oh, okay, here we go. Oh, so I wanted to give some advice for those of you that are interested in working in the corporate environment, or you want to work your way up in the corporate ladder, or just grow as a leader in your restaurant. I wanted to give you some advice from somebody that's been doing it. I've been in the business for 23 years. Most of my time has been in the corporate restaurant world. So my advice to you, I've got 3 tips. One, I would say always continue to do ongoing learning. Really become a subject matter expertise and always continue to learn your craft. I never stop learning about food. I never stop learning about cooking. I have tons and tons of cookbooks. I'm always asking questions. I'm always reading and learning new things about cooking because I love it, right? If you're a chef, you love cooking, or you wouldn't do this, man. It's hard. You wouldn't do this if you hated it. So engage your curiosity and continue to do ongoing learning always, not just in food, but really in everything, in business or finance or whatever you want to do to make you more successful in your job and in your career. Always keep building on yourself. The other thing I would say is to collaborate with others. Learn, teach, share ideas. I can work on my own for sure. I can come in here and really put my head down and just focus on my dishes. But I tell you, when I collaborate with the other chefs, I get their ideas, I get their input, I ask them what they think. I try their food, they try my food. My product comes out a lot better. And that's really always a product of collaboration. So I would encourage you to really get people's opinions. Ask the customer, ask your prep cook, ask somebody what they think. Do you think this needs more sauce? Do you think it needs more acidity? Does it need more salt? Find out what other people think and really collaborate and share ideas, and you'll get better as a chef. And then the last thing I would say is personal growth. This goes a little bit with my first tip, but always push yourself in growth to become a better leader. A chef is a leader. You lead a kitchen, you lead your cooks, and you can never stop becoming a better leader. And if you continue to focus on leadership and develop your leadership over time, it really can help you grow and build your career, whether you want to be the head of your own restaurant or just stay in a single unit, or you want to go to multi-unit, you want to go to the corporate world. Developing yourself as a leader is always going to be beneficial to you, no matter what role you're in. So I hope you enjoyed my talk here. Those are my tips, and I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything.
All right. Well, wow, Chef, amazing presentation. And that pasta looks so delicious. I really wish I was there. And I definitely love the comeback flavor. I'm stealing that term as well. Okay, so we do have several questions that have come in. We won't get to everyone's questions, but I think that just speaks to that. Hopefully we'll be able to have you come back again and share with us. So one of the chefs or students has written a question that is, what is the shelf life for hand-rolled pastas? Can you make these ahead and freeze them and serve at a later date?
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely can. So the dough will hold up for about 2 days, and you can freeze fresh pasta. So if I want to take those nests and freeze them, they'll last in the freezer. Raviolis will last in the freezer. If you're going to leave it fresh, I would recommend using it in probably a day or two. Maybe you might get 3 out of it if you keep it airtight, but you can absolutely freeze fresh pasta. And you can cook from frozen. You put it right. Listen, I've got some tortellini in my freezer at home. Anytime I want a quick dinner, I pull out some brodo from my freezer, throw the tortellini in, I got dinner in 5 minutes. It's a great question.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. One of the chefs tuning in was wondering if you might be able to generally describe the process from when you have an idea for a dish to it getting onto a menu like Carrabba's throughout the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. It's a long process. So, it starts with the ideation phase, and that there's a lot of input into that, right? For me, I need to know, what am I trying to solve? I'm a product developer, right? What product am I trying to make, and what am I trying to to solve for. And I'll use the happy hour menu as an example. We needed something. We took our happy hour menu or a happy hour offering off when COVID happened. And when we came back to the real world or whatever, we didn't really bring it back because it wasn't a very successful menu. We weren't really, it wasn't really doing what we wanted for it. So what we wanted was something that could be smaller, shareable, bring people in from like 3 to 7, get them excited about Carrabba's, give them something new and different to try in the restaurant. That's, not our, we were doing just like smaller versions of our appetizers. And something that will give them the opportunity to really try and taste things and not break the budget, right? We wanted people to be able to come in after work, have some happy hour, and not have a lower price bill, right? So that was, for me, that was the ask, so create smaller plates, something that meets all those needs. And then I work with, a lot of times I work with the marketing company. I work very closely with product marketing. We talk a lot about, what would work here. So, we did some meatball sliders. They'd mentioned, hey, we need something for people that don't eat meat. Okay, so we'll do a bruschetta caprese. Hey, how about something fried? Fried goes really good with the drink. If you're having a nice cold beer, you want something fried. So we did a fried mezzaluna. Hey, let's do something that's a little different. We did a cacio e pepe, truffle cacio e pepe pasta, which is, kind of different for our consumer and new for our restaurant. That's kind of the beginning of it, right? So I innovated all these ideas, and I had way more than that. I had a lot of different ideas that I did, different platings. And I, again, I worked with the other chefs here. It wasn't all me. I have some people on my team that help me out. And then what I do is we put together what's called a tasting. Some people call it a cutting, where we bring in representatives from the leadership team. So the president of the company, the vice president, the head of marketing, the head of operations, the head of finance, all those people come in and they're all looking at it with a different lens, right? Like, finance person is looking at the financial side of it. The operations person is looking at like, hey, how can we execute this? Is this going to be too hard? Is this something we can do on a consistent basis? The marketing person is probably thinking about, how's this going to look on social media, to be honest with you? Or what can I talk about this? How can I message this to the guests? So they're all looking at it from a different perspective. And then we bring that food in and, they all go through everything, talk about it. And look, sometimes I hit a home run, they love everything. And sometimes I don't. And, they say, hey, we like this, but we think it needs more of this, or we think it needs to be bigger, or we love this idea. Let's keep going here. Or look, we don't like this idea. We don't feel like this is the right fit for Carrabba's. And, that's kind of how we come to a decision, right? It's a group decision. And then from there, we'll typically go into test. We'll test that in a few restaurants and get some operational feedback, get some consumer feedback, some financial feedback. And from there, we'll make a decision on what gets launched nationally. That's the development process.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that insight. We have a culinary apprentice who is tuning in. They're very inspired by you, and they're wondering, what was your first job in food service? And then how did that pathway lead into becoming an R&D chef?
That's a good question. So I had a kind of a weird path into R&D. My first job in food was, I worked in a pizza place when I was in high school. I didn't really make pizzas. I was like hanging these little things on the door. Like, you go to people's door and put it on there. I don't think you can even do that these days. You probably get shot. But I made pizzas a little bit in high school, but I really wasn't into the culinary business until I got in college. I got into working at a couple restaurants that were on campus, and these were fast food restaurants. It was a taco place, a chicken place. I liked it. It was fun, but I really wasn't very into the culinary thing. I just, it was a good job, but it really wasn't something that I didn't really have the bug yet. And then I moved to, I graduated from the University of Florida. I moved to Tampa to go to grad school, and I was going to be a college professor. I took a summer off and I needed a job. And a friend of mine got me a job at a restaurant. And this was a real restaurant with really making real food, making things from scratch, sauteing, grilling. It wasn't like fast food. And I was definitely not qualified to work there because I didn't know what I was doing. But my friend got me the job, and he trained me, and I absolutely fell in love with the restaurant business. I loved the pace of it. I loved the food. I loved everything about it. And I just knew, like, this is something I want to continue to do. So, I put school on hold, and that was 23 years ago.
Wow. All right. Very, very cool. And so we have a follow-up question that's sort of on the same topic, which someone's wondering what advice that you might have for line cooks and those who are just entering the industry after culinary school. Anything that they should be working on skill-wise, soft or hard skills?
Yeah, well, both. I think soft and hard is very important. For me, I learned that longer in my career than I wish I had. I will tell you, when I was a younger cook, I was a little rough around the edges. And I wish I had learned the softer skills sooner, but I'm a slow learner. And for me, I kind of learned by making mistakes. But, I would say absolutely, like I talked about earlier, master your craft. Always learn how to do your craft very well and how to do it well and how to do it composed. Like, make sure you can work clean, you can work calm under pressure, because I will tell you, in this business, the more you go up, it doesn't get easier. You still are. I'm under an immense amount of pressure. It's a little bit different than working a Saturday night grill shift, but you still are going to be under that same pressure and that feeling of being in the weeds and being busy all the time. That kind of sticks with you in the restaurant business, kind of no matter where you go, even when you go higher up. So I would say learning how to deal with that, learning how to be calm and collected under pressure, learning how to communicate well with other people and work with people when your restaurant is very busy, how to continue to be the leader and step up and execute and not be the person that complains and kind of falls apart under pressure. You want to make sure that you can continue to do that and set that leadership example in your restaurant. I think that will really help you in your position. I think it'll help you in the future. The cooks that are the ones that can, really, they're reliable, they're the ones that are going to be able to get through the shift and not, be able to handle any kind of thing that comes to them with a clean station, with a thoughtful intent on making great food and without, with a good attitude. Those are the cooks you love. And you just love when those cooks show up. I remember when I was in the restaurant, when my favorite grill guy got here, I'd see him and I was like, yes, my favorite grill guy is here, Carlos. I don't have to worry about the grill tonight. He's going to be fantastic. And I love Carlos, right? You want to be Carlos. You want people to think about you like I did to Carlos. And that's only going to be good for your career. And I can tell you, Carlos had a wonderful career. He started as a salad cook and made his way up to a kitchen manager, and he was awesome.
Awesome. I love it. Well, quick question then. Are you hiring at Bloomin Brands? And do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the chef tuning in today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So we're always hiring at Bloomin Brands in the restaurants. We are actually hiring in R&D. It's located in Tampa. The job should be posted if they're not posted today, they should be posted next week on the website. I believe it's on bloominbrands.com, but if not, it's probably also on the regular job boards. So we are hiring. We don't hire in R&D here often, but we are hiring for some associates to come in to give us some help on prep. So very good timing on that question there. And really, as far as final thoughts, and look, we're always hiring in our restaurants. So if you're looking for a job, go apply to any of our restaurants. Even if they're not hiring at that moment, they might put your application on file, and they may need somebody next week. You never know in the restaurant business. As far as final thoughts, I would just say, hey, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I said earlier that my goal earlier in my life was to be a college teacher, and then I fell in love with food, and now it's really gratifying to me to be able to give back and teach about food, my favorite subject. So I'm really happy that there's actually an audience that wants to hear what I have to say. So thank you very much. And yeah, if you want to learn more, I do have a personal website. It's called lineageculinary.com. That is not affiliated with Bloomin Brands in any way. It's just my personal website that I put some articles about traveling and food, some recipes. So if you're interested in that, please check it out. We also are on social at Lineage Culinary. If you're interested in Bloomin Brands, bloominbrands.com is our company website. And look, best of luck to everybody. And thanks for listening.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chef. A huge virtual round of applause as we thank Chef Lett for a very informative and delicious presentation. I hope you've all been inspired to make some hand-rolled pastas today or go out and dine at one of the restaurants. And so we appreciate you taking the time to share your awesome insights on Italian cuisine with all of us today. We are very proud to have you as part of the ACF community, and we look forward to seeing you again soon, hopefully in person. We hope that all of you tuning in will also join us for our next pre-convention webinar, which will be held on July 10th for a presentation on chocolate techniques with award-winning pastry chef Susan Nodder, CEPC. We also look forward to seeing you at ACF National Convention, July 16th to 19th in New Orleans. It's not too late to register, and you don't want to miss it. We have amazing education, demonstrations, and networking opportunities planned, and we would love to see you all there. And also mark your calendars for one of our upcoming one-day ACF Mastercraft Summits to be held across the country. We've designed one-day programming, especially for culinary educators, for advanced culinary, advanced pastry, and nutrition. So you can visit acfchefs.org to register or find out more information. So again, on behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to our guest chef, Jeremy Lett, for bringing us this opportunity. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you all in New Orleans. Thank you.